The Italian sun was setting behind the rolling hills of Tuscany when Robert finally arrived at his new estate. After 3 hours of driving through winding country roads, he was exhausted. The massive iron gates opened slowly, revealing a long driveway lined with cypress trees. At the end of it stood his villa, a beautiful old building with terracotta roof tiles and cream-colored walls covered in climbing ivy. Robert stepped out of his rental car and just stood there for a moment, taking it all in. At 58 years old, he'd worked his entire life for this. Decades of building his real estate business in Chicago, sacrificing weekends and holidays, all leading to this moment. He'd finally bought his dream home in Italy. The front door opened and a woman walked out to greet him. She looked to be in her early 60s, wearing a simple black dress and a white apron. Her dark skin contrasted beautifully against the golden light of the setting sun. "Good evening, sir," she said in accented English. "I am Rosa. I take care of the house." Robert smiled and shook her hand. "Nice to meet you, Rosa. The real estate agent mentioned you'd been working here for a long time." 30 years, sir," Rosa said quietly, picking up one of his suitcases. "Come inside. You must be tired from your journey." The interior of the villa took Robert's breath away. High ceilings with exposed wooden beams, marble floors that had been worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, and large windows that let in the warm evening light. Everything was exactly as he'd imagined it would be during those long Chicago winters, when he dreamed of retiring here. Rosa led him through the main hall and into a spacious living room. "I prepared the master bedroom upstairs," she said. "Would you like to see it now, or would you prefer to rest here first?" "I think I'll just settle in down here for now," Robert said, sinking into a leather chair. "Maybe get something to drink. It's been a long day." Rosa nodded and started to leave, but Robert called after her. "Rosa, wait. I wanted to ask you something. The previous owners, the Castellano family, why did they sell the place? The agent wasn't very clear about it." Something flickered across Rosa's face just for a second, but then it was gone. "Mr. Castellano passed away 6 months ago, sir. The family decided they did not want to keep the property." "I see. I'm sorry to hear that," Robert said. "Well, I'm grateful they decided to sell. This place is incredible." Rosa gave a small nod and disappeared into the hallway. Robert heard her footsteps fading toward what he assumed was the kitchen. He got up and started exploring the ground floor. Every room seemed to have its own story. Ancient furniture, oil paintings of people he didn't recognize, and shelves filled with leather-bound books in Italian. In what looked like a study, he found a massive wooden desk with intricate carvings along its edges. Then he discovered the door to the wine cellar. It was tucked away under the main staircase, almost hidden behind a decorative curtain. Robert pulled it aside and found heavy wooden steps leading down into darkness. He felt along the wall until he found a light switch. The cellar was bigger than he'd expected. Stone walls kept it cool, and rows upon rows of wine bottles lined the walls in wooden racks. Some of them looked incredibly old, covered in dust and cobwebs. Robert wasn't a wine expert, but he knew enough to recognize that some of these bottles might be worth serious money. He walked along the rows, reading labels when he could make them out. Many were in Italian, but he recognized a few famous names: Barolo, Brunello, Chianti. His fingers traced along the necks of the bottles until he found one that caught his eye. The label was faded, but he could make out the year 1967. "Now that's what I'm talking about," he said to himself with a grin. "First night in my new home deserves something special." He carefully pulled the bottle from its slot and carried it upstairs, cradling it like a precious artifact. Back in the living room, he found a corkscrew on a sideboard along with several crystal wine glasses. He set everything down on the coffee table and started working on opening the bottle. The cork was stubborn, dried out from decades in the cellar. Robert had to grip the bottle between his knees to get enough leverage. Finally, with a satisfying pop, the cork came free. He poured a generous amount into one of the crystal glasses. The wine was deep red, almost black in the dim light of the room. Robert lifted the glass to his nose, inhaling the complex aroma. There was something slightly off about the smell, but he figured that was just because the bottle was so old. He raised the glass to his lips. "Non bere quello!" The shout came from the doorway. Robert jerked in surprise, wine sloshing in the glass but not quite spilling. Rosa stood there, her eyes wide with what looked like genuine fear. She rushed across the room faster than he would have thought possible for someone her age. "Never drink that," she said again, this time in English, and took the glass right out of his hand. Robert stared at her in shock. Rosa, what are you? But she was already moving, taking the glass to the sideboard and setting it down carefully, as if it contained poison instead of wine. Her hands were shaking. I'm sorry, sir, she said, not meeting his eyes. But that wine, it is not safe, not safe. Robert stood up confused and a little annoyed. Rosa, it's just an old bottle of wine. Sure, it might have gone bad, but no, sir. Rosa's voice was barely above a whisper. She was wringing her hands together, clearly distressed. It is not about being old. That wine it is dangerous. Robert looked from Rosa to the bottle and back again. I don't understand. What do you mean, dangerous? Rosa closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, there were tears gathering at the corners. Please, sir, trust me. Do not drink anything from that cellar. Not yet. The way she said it made something cold settle in Robert's stomach. This wasn't just a housekeeper worried about her new employer getting sick from spoiled wine. There was real fear in her voice. Rosa, he said gently, you need to tell me what's going on. Why would the wine be dangerous? She looked toward the windows as if checking to make sure they were alone. Then she moved closer to Robert and spoke in a low voice. The Castellano family? They were not good people, sir. And that wine cellar. It is not what it seems. What do you mean, not what it seems? It's just wine bottles, Rosa shook her head. Some of them are wine, yes. But some... She trailed off, struggling to find the words. Some of them will make you very sick. Some of them could kill you. Robert felt his blood run cold. Are you saying someone poisoned the wine? Not exactly, Rosa said. It is complicated. But yes, some of those bottles are not safe to drink. I know which ones are dangerous and which ones are not, but you cannot tell just by looking at them. Robert sank back into his chair, his mind racing. How do you know this? And why didn't anyone tell me before I bought the place? Rosa was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that made Robert's heart skip a beat. She spoke in perfect, fluent Italian, rapid and natural. Nothing like the halting English she'd been using. Because I've been keeping this secret for 30 years, and I'm the only one left who knows the truth. Robert stared at her. You speak Italian? Yes, sir. I learned it when I first came to Italy from Nigeria. I was 28 years old and needed work. The Castellano family hired me, but... She switched back to English. They thought I only spoke a little Italian. Very basic words. So they talked freely around me. They never knew I understood everything. What did you hear? Robert asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Rosa walked over to the window and looked out at the darkening hills. Mr. Castellano, Eduardo his name was, he sold wine to rich people all over the world. Very expensive bottles, rare vintages, collector's items, but many of them were fake. Fake wine? Yes, he had equipment in a hidden room in the cellar. He would make bottles look old, create false labels, fill them with cheap wine mixed with other things. Things that would make the wine taste more complex, more aged. But some of those things were not safe. Robert's hand instinctively went to his throat. He'd been seconds away from drinking that wine. And you've known about this for 30 years? Rosa nodded, still not looking at him. At first I did not understand what I was seeing. Then one night I went down to the cellar to get a bottle for dinner guests, and I found Mr. Castellano in the hidden room. He was angry that I had discovered it. He told me that if I ever spoke about what I had seen, something bad would happen to my family back in Nigeria. He threatened you. Yes. My mother was sick. My younger brothers and sisters needed money for school. I was sending everything I could back home. So I stayed quiet, but I also started paying attention. I learned which bottles were real and which were fake, which ones were safe and which ones had dangerous chemicals in them. Robert felt sick to his stomach, and not from the wine he hadn't drunk. Rosa, why didn't you go to the police? She finally turned to look at him, and he could see the weight of 3 decades in her eyes. Because I was afraid, sir. Eduardo had powerful friends, police, judges, businessmen, and I was just a housekeeper from Africa. Who would believe me? And even if they did believe me, my family would suffer. So I stayed, and I tried to protect people in small ways. What do you mean? When guests would visit and want wine from the cellar, I would make sure they only got the safe bottles. When Eduardo wanted to sell a dangerous bottle, sometimes I would have accidents. Break the bottle while cleaning. Spill it, hide it. Small things he would not notice. Over the years, I saved as many people as I could. Robert stood up and walked over to where Rosa stood. "You've been protecting people all this time, risking your own safety." Rosa shrugged. "I could not let innocent people die just because I was afraid. But I also could not sacrifice my family, so I did what I could, where I could." "And Eduardo? What happened to him?" "He died 6 months ago. Heart attack," the doctor said. "But I sometimes wonder." She trailed off, leaving the implication hanging in the air. Robert looked back at the wine glass sitting on the sideboard, the deep red liquid still inside. "And this bottle I almost drank?" Rosa walked over and picked up the bottle, examining the label. "This one has methanol in it. Not much, but enough. You would not die from one glass, probably, but you would become very sick. Headache, nausea, vision problems, and if you drank the whole bottle." She didn't finish the sentence. Robert felt his knees go weak. He'd been so excited about christening his new home with a vintage wine. If Rosa hadn't stopped him, "Thank you," he said quietly. "You saved my life tonight." Rosa set the bottle down carefully. "It is what I do, sir. What I have always done." "No more," Robert said firmly. "Rosa, this needs to end. This secret you've been carrying, it's too big, too dangerous. We need to do something about it." For the first time since she'd rushed into the room, Rosa looked truly frightened. "Sir, please." "The Castellano family can't hurt you anymore," Robert interrupted. "Not if we handle this right. Eduardo is gone, but there might be other victims out there. People who bought poisoned wine and don't know it. We have to tell someone." Rosa was silent for a long moment, and Robert could see the internal struggle playing out on her face. 30 years of fear and silence battling against the relief of finally being able to tell the truth. "Sir," she said finally, "if we do this, if we tell the authorities, my life will change." "Everything will change," Robert nodded. "Yes, it will. But maybe it's time for a change. A good change for once." Rosa looked at him, really looked at him, as if trying to decide whether she could trust this American stranger who had just bought her prison and called it a dream home. Then, slowly, she nodded. "There are things I need to show you," she said. "Things I have kept hidden. Evidence, records, names. Everything I could gather over the years. Just in case this day ever came." "Show me," Robert said. As Rosa led him back toward the wine cellar, Robert realized that his peaceful retirement in Tuscany was going to be anything but peaceful. But looking at the woman walking ahead of him, this quiet, brave woman who had spent 3 decades protecting strangers while trapped in fear, he knew that helping her was more important than any amount of peace and quiet. His new life in Italy was starting with a mystery, and somehow that felt exactly right. Rosa led Robert down the stone steps into the wine cellar, but this time she didn't stop at the main room. Instead, she walked to the far corner where an old wooden shelf stood against the wall, stacked with dusty bottles. "Help me move this," she said. Robert grabbed one side of the shelf while Rosa took the other. It was heavier than it looked, but together they managed to slide it a few feet to the left. Behind it, Robert saw something that made his breath catch. A small door, barely 4 feet tall, built right into the stone wall. It had been completely hidden by the shelf. "I found this door by accident my second year here," Rosa said, pulling a key from her apron pocket. "I was cleaning down here one day and I knocked over a bottle. It rolled behind the shelf, and when I moved it to get the bottle back, I saw this." She unlocked the door and pushed it open. The hinges creaked from years of disuse. Beyond the door was a narrow passageway that opened into a small room. Rosa reached inside and flipped a light switch. The hidden room was about the size of a bedroom with brick walls and a low ceiling. But what filled the space made Robert's jaw drop. There was a workbench covered with tools, label makers, different kinds of paper, bottles of various chemicals, and equipment for heating and melting glass. Boxes of corks lined one wall, organized by age and type. And on another wall hung dozens of wine labels, some blank and some that looked like they'd been carefully removed from bottles. "This is where Eduardo made the fake wines," Rosa said quietly, stepping into the room. "He was very skilled. He could make a bottle from last year look like it was from 50 years ago." Robert walked around the room, taking it all in. On the workbench, he found notebooks filled with handwritten notes in Italian. Formulas, dates, names of buyers. It was all here, a complete record of decades of fraud. "Did you understand what all this meant when you first found it?" Robert asked. Rosa shook her head. "Not at first. I knew it was wrong, but I did not understand how wrong. Then one night, About 3 months after I found this room, there was a dinner party. Important people from Milano and Roma came to visit. Rich collectors who wanted to buy rare wines. She sat down on a small stool in the corner, and Robert could see she was preparing to tell him something difficult. Eduardo was showing them his collection, bringing up bottles from the cellar and telling stories about each one. The men were so excited, asking prices, making offers. I was serving the dinner, pretending I barely understood Italian, just like always. And then I heard Eduardo tell one of the men about a special bottle he had. A wine from 1947. Very rare, very expensive. He said it would cost 50,000 euros. Robert whistled low. That's a lot of money. Yes, the man agreed to buy it. But after dinner, when the guests were in the living room having coffee, I came down here to the cellar to clean up the wine glasses. And I saw Eduardo in this room working. He was taking a cheap bottle of wine and pouring it into an old bottle. Then he added things, chemicals from these containers here. He was making the wine he had just sold for 50,000 euros, and he was making it from a bottle that probably cost 20. That's when you realized what was happening? Rosa nodded. I was so shocked that I made a sound. Just a small gasp, but Eduardo heard it. He turned around and saw me standing there in the doorway. She paused, her hands gripping the edge of the stool. I will never forget the look on his face. It was not surprise or embarrassment. It was cold calculation. He was deciding what to do about me. What did he say? At first, nothing. He just stared at me. Then he smiled, but it was not a kind smile. He said in Italian, Rosa, you have seen something you should not have seen. I tried to pretend I did not understand, but he shook his head. He said, I know you speak Italian. I have always known. You think you are clever, listening to conversations, but I noticed long ago. Robert felt a chill run down his spine. You must have been terrified. I was, Rosa admitted. He came closer to me and said that what he was doing was business. Important business that helped many people. He said that rich collectors did not care if the wine was real or fake. They just wanted to show off to their friends. And he said that if I ever told anyone what I had seen, something terrible would happen to my family in Nigeria. He threatened your family directly? Rosa's voice dropped to almost a whisper. He knew everything about them. My mother's name, where my brothers and sisters lived, what school they attended. He even knew that my youngest sister was getting married that year. He said it would be such a shame if something happened to ruin her wedding day. Robert felt anger rising in his chest. That's blackmail. Yes, but it worked. I had no money, no power, no one to turn to. And Eduardo had friends everywhere. Rich people, connected people. So I agreed to keep his secret. But I made myself a promise that night. What promise? Rosa stood up and walked to a loose brick in the wall. She wiggled it free and reached into the hole behind it, pulling out a small metal box. I promised myself that even if I had to stay silent, I would protect people however I could. And I would keep evidence, just in case. She opened the metal box. Inside were several small notebooks, their pages filled with Rosa's handwriting. Robert took one and flipped through it. Dates, bottle numbers, buyer names, descriptions of which wines were real and which were fake. I started writing everything down, Rosa explained. Every bottle Eduardo made, every sale, every shipment that left the villa. I wrote it in a code, mixing Italian, English, and my native language, Yoruba. That way, if Eduardo ever found the notebooks, he would not be able to read them easily. Robert looked at her with new respect. You documented everything, for 30 years, every single fake bottle that I knew about. And more than that, I marked the dangerous ones. Dangerous? You mean the ones with chemicals? Rosa took the notebook back and flipped to a page near the middle. Eduardo's formula changed over the years. At first, he just used cheap wine and artificial coloring. Those fake bottles would not taste very good, but they would not hurt anyone. But then he started experimenting with other chemicals to make the wine taste more complex, more aged. She pointed to a series of entries marked with a small red dot. These are the bottles that contain methanol. Eduardo discovered that adding small amounts of methanol would give the wine a certain sharpness that made it seem older. But methanol is poison. A little bit will make you sick. More than that can blind you or kill you. Robert felt his stomach turn. How many bottles are like that? I counted 47 bottles with methanol still in the cellar when Eduardo died. And over the years, I know he sold at least 100 more to collectors around the world. 100 bottles of poisoned wine, just out there somewhere. Yes. I tried to stop what I could. Sometimes when Eduardo was preparing to ship a dangerous bottle, I would find a way to break it, or I would spill it accidentally. Once I even switched the labels on 2 bottles so a dangerous one went to the seller instead of to a buyer. Eduardo got angry about the mistakes, but he never suspected I was doing it on purpose. Robert sat down on the workbench, his mind racing. Rosa, do you know who bought these poisoned bottles? Do you have names? Rosa nodded and pulled out another notebook. Yes, not all of them, but many. Eduardo kept records too, and sometimes I was able to copy down information from his office when he was away. She opened the notebook to show Robert page after page of names, addresses, and dates. Wealthy collectors from Italy, France, England, America. People who had paid thousands or even hundreds of thousands of euros for wine that could kill them. We need to tell someone about this, Robert said. The police, the authorities, someone who can track down these bottles and warn people. Rosa closed the notebook, her expression troubled. I know. But sir, you must understand, if we do this, there will be consequences. The Castellano family will not be happy. They will try to protect their reputation. Eduardo is dead. What can they do? He has 3 children. 2 sons and a daughter, all adults now. They inherited his business, his properties, everything. If this scandal comes out, they will lose their wealth, their status. They will fight back. Robert stood up and looked Rosa in the eye. Let them fight. Rosa, you've been protecting people for 30 years while living in fear. Don't you want this to end? Don't you want to be free? For a long moment, Rosa didn't say anything. Then slowly, tears began to roll down her cheeks. Every day for 30 years, I have woken up afraid. Afraid that Eduardo would discover my notebooks. Afraid that someone would drink the wrong wine and die. Afraid that my family would be hurt because of what I knew. Yes, sir, I want to be free. But I'm also afraid of what freedom will cost. Robert put a hand on her shoulder. I'll help you. Whatever happens, I'll make sure you're protected. I have lawyers, resources. We'll do this the right way. Rosa wiped her tears and took a deep breath. There is something else you should know. About Eduardo's death. What about it? The doctors said it was a heart attack. But the night before he died, I saw something. Eduardo came down to the cellar late at night. I heard him from my room above the kitchen. I came down to see what he was doing, and I found him here in this hidden room, arguing with someone on his phone. Who was he talking to? I do not know. But he was angry and frightened. I heard him say in Italian, "You cannot do this to me. I have insurance. If anything happens to me, everything will be revealed." Then whoever was on the phone said something that made Eduardo very pale. He said, "You would not dare," but his voice was shaking. Robert felt a chill. You think someone killed him? I do not know. But the next morning, Eduardo did not come down for breakfast. By afternoon, he was dead. The family called it a heart attack, but they had him cremated very quickly. No autopsy. Did you tell anyone about the phone call? Rosa shook her head. Who would I tell? And what would I say? That I heard him arguing and then he died? It could have been a coincidence. But I have always wondered. Robert walked around the hidden room again, looking at all the evidence of decades of fraud, bottles, labels, chemicals, notebooks. It was overwhelming. Tomorrow, he said finally, we're going to contact the authorities. I know a lawyer in Rome. I used him when buying this property. He can help us figure out the right people to talk to. But tonight I want you to show me everything. Every notebook, every record you have. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with before we move forward. Rosa nodded and began pulling more items from hiding places around the room. Another metal box from behind a loose stone. A folder tucked under the workbench. A small bag hidden inside an empty chemical container. As she laid everything out on the workbench, Robert realized just how thorough she had been. Bills of sale, shipping records, photographs of bottles, newspaper clippings about suspicious deaths among wine collectors. She had collected anything that might one day prove useful. Rosa, he said softly, you could have used this information to blackmail the Castellano family. You could have demanded money to keep quiet. Why didn't you? Rosa looked at him as if he'd asked the strangest question in the world. Because that would make me just like Eduardo. I did not keep these records for money. I kept them because I hoped that someday the truth would matter. That someday, justice would be possible. They spent the next 3 hours going through everything. Robert took photographs of the documents with his phone. Rosa explained the coding system in her notebooks and identified which bottles in the cellar were dangerous. She showed him Eduardo's sales records and pointed out patterns. Certain buyers who purchased multiple bottles, galleries and auction houses that helped sell the fake wines, shipping companies that were part of the scheme. By the time they finished, it was past midnight. They climbed back up the stairs and Robert helped Rosa move the shelf back over the hidden door. In the kitchen, Rosa made tea while Robert sat at the old wooden table, his mind still processing everything he'd learned. "Sir," Rosa said as she set a cup in front of him, "why are you helping me? You bought this villa as a retirement home. You could have just ignored what I told you. You could have asked me to keep quiet and enjoy your wine in peace." Robert wrapped his hands around the warm cup. "My father died when I was 12 years old. He was a construction worker, and he knew his boss was cutting corners on a building project using cheap materials, ignoring safety codes. He wanted to report it, but he was afraid of losing his job. We needed the money. What happened? The building collapsed 6 months later. 3 people died. My father blamed himself for the rest of his life. He would wake up at night from nightmares. He drank too much. He was never the same. And then one day his heart just gave out. The doctor said it was cardiac failure, but I think it was guilt that killed him." Rosa sat down across from him, understanding in her eyes. "I saw what keeping a terrible secret did to my father," Robert continued. "I watched it destroy him piece by piece. When you told me what you'd been carrying for 30 years, I knew I couldn't let you keep carrying it alone. My father never got the chance to make things right. But you can. We can." Rosa reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Thank you, sir. You are a good man. Call me Robert. If we're going to do this together, we should at least be on a first-name basis." Rosa smiled, the first real smile Robert had seen from her. "Thank you, Robert." They sat in the quiet kitchen for a while longer, drinking tea and watching the moon rise over the Tuscan hills through the window. Tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow they would begin the process of bringing decades of lies into the light. But tonight, for the first time in 30 years, Rosa felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The next morning, Robert woke up early despite having only gotten a few hours of sleep. His mind was racing with everything Rosa had shown him the night before. He showered, dressed, and found Rosa already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. "Did you sleep at all?" he asked her. Rosa shook her head. "Not much. I kept thinking about what we are going to do today. After all these years of silence, it feels strange to imagine speaking." Robert poured himself coffee from the pot on the counter. "We'll take it one step at a time. First, I'm going to call Antonio. That's my lawyer in Rome. He helped me with the property purchase. He's a good man, honest. We can trust him. And what will you tell him?" "The truth. All of it." Robert pulled out his phone and found Antonio's number. It rang 3 times before a cheerful voice answered. "Robert, good morning. How is the villa? Are you settling in well?" "Antonio, I need your help with something urgent. Something serious." The cheerfulness left Antonio's voice immediately. "What is wrong? Is there a problem with the property?" "It's complicated. Can you come to the villa today? I need you to see something and I need your advice on how to proceed legally." There was a pause. "This sounds serious, my friend." "Yes, I can come. I will be there by noon. But Robert, please tell me. Is this about the Castellano family?" Robert glanced at Rosa, who was listening intently. "Yes, it is." Another pause, longer this time. "I will be there as soon as I can. Do not do anything until I arrive, yes? Do not contact anyone else." "Why? What's wrong?" "Just trust me. I will explain when I get there." "Stay at the villa. Stay safe." The call ended and Robert felt a knot form in his stomach. Antonio's tone had changed completely when he mentioned the Castellano family. It was the voice of someone who knew something dangerous. He sounded worried. Rosa said quietly. "Yes, he did." The morning dragged by slowly. Robert tried to distract himself by exploring more of the villa, but his mind kept drifting back to the hidden room and the notebooks. Rosa went about her usual work, but he noticed she kept glancing at the windows as if expecting someone to appear. Finally, just before noon, they heard a car coming up the driveway. Robert looked out and saw a sleek black sedan pulling up to the front door. Antonio stepped out, but he wasn't alone. A woman in her 40s got out of the passenger side carrying a leather briefcase. Robert met them at the door. Antonio, usually so relaxed and friendly, looked tense. "Robert, this is Detective Francesca Moretti." She is with the Financial Crimes Division in Florence. I called her on my way here. You called the police? Robert wasn't sure if he should be relieved or concerned. Trust me, Antonio said quietly. Detective Moretti is one of the few people who can help with this situation. May we come in? Robert led them to the living room where Rosa was waiting. When she saw the detective, she went pale and took a step backward. It's okay, Rosa, Robert said quickly. Antonio says we can trust her. Detective Moretti had sharp, intelligent eyes that took in everything. She looked at Rosa with interest. You must be Rosa Ademola. I have been hoping to meet you for a very long time. Rosa's eyes widened. You know who I am? I know of you. Please sit down, all of you. The detective waited until everyone was seated before continuing. I have been investigating the Castellano family for 3 years. Eduardo Castellano specifically. We suspected he was involved in wine fraud, but we could never prove it. He was very careful and he had protection in high places. What kind of protection? Robert asked. Judges who would dismiss cases, police officers who would lose evidence, politicians who owed him favors. Eduardo had been building his network for decades. Every time we got close to catching him, something would happen to stop the investigation. Antonio leaned forward. When Robert called me this morning and mentioned the Castellano family, I knew immediately this was serious. I have heard rumors for years about Eduardo's business, so I called Francesca. Detective Moretti pulled a notepad from her briefcase. Now please tell me everything. And I do mean everything. For the next 2 hours, Robert and Rosa told their story. Rosa's voice shook at first, but as she continued, she became stronger. She told the detective about finding the hidden room, about Eduardo's threats, about 30 years of documenting everything while living in fear. When Rosa mentioned the notebooks, Detective Moretti's eyes lit up. You have written records? Dated entries? Names of buyers? Yes, everything is downstairs. Show me, please. They all went down to the wine cellar. Robert and Rosa moved the shelf aside and opened the hidden door. Detective Moretti stood in the doorway of the secret room for a long moment, just looking. Then she pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. This is incredible, she said. All the equipment, the chemicals, everything is still here. Eduardo's children must not have known about this room. I do not think anyone knew except Eduardo and me, Rosa said. He was very secretive. Rosa brought out all the notebooks, the documents, the photographs. Detective Moretti went through each one carefully, occasionally asking questions. When she got to the notebook with the red dots marking the poisoned bottles, her expression darkened. Methanol, she said. He was selling wine with methanol in it? Yes, Rosa confirmed. I marked every bottle I knew about. Do you know how many of these bottles are still out there? Bottles that people might drink? Rosa's voice was barely a whisper. I counted the entries last night. 143 bottles with methanol were sold over the years. 47 more are still here in the cellar. The room fell silent. 143 bottles of poisoned wine, scattered around the world in the collections of wealthy people who had no idea they were in danger. Detective Moretti closed the notebook and looked at Rosa with something like awe. You kept all of this evidence for 30 years knowing that if Eduardo discovered it, you would be in terrible danger. I had to, Rosa said simply. I could not stop Eduardo, but I could at least remember. I could at least keep the truth alive even if no one else knew it. You are very brave, the detective said. But now we need to act quickly. We need to find those bottles before anyone else gets hurt. They went back upstairs and Detective Moretti started making phone calls. She spoke rapid Italian into her phone, pacing back and forth in the living room. Robert caught words like urgent and international and poisoning. When she finished, she turned to the group. I have contacted Interpol. This is now an international case. We will need to track down every buyer on Rosa's list and issue warnings. Some of those people may have already consumed the wine. We will need to check hospital records for unexplained illnesses that match methanol poisoning. What about the Castellano family? Robert asked. Eduardo's children. What happens to them? Detective Moretti's expression hardened. They will be investigated thoroughly. If they knew about their father's crimes, they will be charged as accomplices. Even if they did not know, they benefited from the illegal profits. Assets will be frozen, property will be seized. Antonio spoke up. Francesca, there is something else. The children, they have influence just like their father did. When this news breaks, they will try to protect themselves. Let them try, the detective said firmly. I have been waiting 3 years for a break in this case. Rosa has given us everything we need. Documented evidence, physical proof, eyewitness testimony. This case is solid. But Robert noticed the worried look Antonio and the detective exchanged. There was something they weren't saying. What is it? He asked. What aren't you telling us? Detective Moretti sighed. Eduardo's oldest son, Matteo, is a prosecutor in Milano. His younger son, Luca, is a prominent businessman with connections throughout Italy. Their sister, Isabella, married into a political family. They will not accept these accusations quietly. They will fight back, and they have the resources to make that fight very difficult. Rosa, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. They will say I am lying. They will say I am trying to steal from the family or get revenge for being fired or something like that. Probably yes, the detective admitted. But we have evidence. Physical evidence that cannot be explained away. They will still try, Rosa said. I know these people. I worked for their father for 30 years. They learned from him how to protect themselves, how to make problems disappear. Robert felt anger rising in his chest. So what do we do? Just let them intimidate us? No, Detective Moretti said. We move fast and we move carefully. Rosa, I'm going to need you to come with me to Florence today. We need to get your full official statement on record, and we need to put you somewhere safe. Safe? Rosa looked alarmed. The Castellano family will find out about this investigation very quickly. When they do, they may try to silence you or discredit you. I want you protected. Rosa looked at Robert, fear clear in her eyes. This was exactly what she had been afraid of for 3 decades. The Castellano family coming after her. Robert stood up. Then I'm coming too. Rosa isn't facing this alone. Mr. Wellington, that is not necessary. Yes, it is, Robert interrupted. I'm not letting Rosa be thrown into some safe house alone after everything she's been through. Besides, I'm a witness too now. I've seen the evidence, the hidden room, everything. If the Castellano family wants to challenge this case, they'll have to deal with both of us. Antonio nodded. I will come as well. As Robert's lawyer, I need to be present for any official proceedings. And as Rosa's lawyer too, if she will have me. Rosa looked surprised. You would be my lawyer? Of course. You are a hero, Rosa. You deserve the best representation possible. Detective Moretti looked at the 3 of them and allowed herself a small smile. Very well. We will all go to Florence. But first I need to secure this hidden room and all the evidence. I am calling in a forensics team. Within an hour, the villa was swarming with police officers and forensics experts. They photographed everything, collected samples, carefully packed up all of Rosa's notebooks and Eduardo's equipment. Robert watched as they brought up the 47 poisoned bottles from the cellar, each one labeled and sealed in evidence bags. One of the forensics experts, a young woman with careful hands, held up a bottle and examined it. Without the marking system Rosa created, we would have no way to tell these apart from regular wine bottles. She may have saved dozens of lives. As the sun began to set, they were ready to leave for Florence. Rosa packed a small bag with her belongings. She didn't have much. 30 years in the villa, and everything she owned fit into one suitcase. Before they left, she walked through the rooms one last time. Robert found her in the kitchen, running her hand along the old wooden table. I spent so many hours in this room, she said softly. Cooking, cleaning, listening to Eduardo and his family talk about their business. Sometimes I hated this place, but it was also my home. You can come back, Robert said, when this is all over if you want to. The villa is yours as much as it's mine now. Rosa smiled sadly. I do not think I can come back. Too many memories. Too much fear in these walls. Then they heard Detective Moretti calling from the front door. It was time to go. The drive to Florence took almost 2 hours. Rosa sat in the back of Detective Moretti's car, with Robert and Antonio following in Robert's rental car. As they drove through the darkening Tuscan countryside, Robert thought about how quickly everything had changed. 24 hours ago, he had been a retired businessman starting a peaceful new life. Now he was driving to the police station to help expose an international fraud case. When they arrived in Florence, Detective Moretti took them to a building that didn't look like a police station at all. It was an old stone structure in a quiet part of the city, away from the tourist areas. This is a safe location, she explained. We use it for witnesses in sensitive cases. Rosa, you will stay here tonight. There are guards, cameras, everything you need to be safe. Inside, they sat in a conference room while Rosa gave her official statement. A court recorder typed everything she said. It took hours. Rosa told her entire story, from the day she first came to work at the villa to the moment she stopped Robert from drinking the poisoned wine. When she finished, it was past midnight. Rosa looked exhausted, drained from reliving 30 years of fear and secrets. Detective Moretti closed her notebook. "Thank you, Rosa. You have been incredibly brave. Now I need to tell you something. Tomorrow morning we will be contacting the Castellano family. We will be informing them that we are opening a formal investigation into Eduardo's business practices, and we will be freezing all family assets pending the outcome of that investigation." "They will know I talked," Rosa said. "Yes. But they will not be able to reach you. You are under police protection now." Robert squeezed Rosa's hand. "We'll get through this together." But even as he said it, Robert felt a chill of worry. The Castellano family had protected their secrets for decades. They wouldn't give up their wealth and reputation without a fight, and fights like this could get dangerous. As they left the conference room, Detective Moretti pulled Robert aside. "Mr. Wellington, I want you to be careful. You are not under official protection like Rosa is, but you should take precautions. Stay alert. Vary your routine. Let someone know where you are at all times." "You think they'll come after me?" "I think the Castellano family has a lot to lose, and desperate people do desperate things." That night, Robert lay awake in his hotel room, thinking about Rosa sleeping in the safe house across the city. She had lived with fear for 30 years. Now that she had finally spoken the truth, that fear should have been gone. But Robert knew it wasn't that simple. The danger wasn't over. In some ways, it was just beginning. The phone call came at 6 in the morning. Robert was barely awake when his cell phone rang. He fumbled for it on the nightstand, squinting at the screen. It was Antonio. "Robert, turn on the television. Any news channel. Now." Robert grabbed the remote and switched on the TV in his hotel room. The morning news was showing a press conference. 3 people sat behind a long table covered with microphones. 2 men in expensive suits and a woman in elegant business attire. The caption at the bottom of the screen read, "Castellano family responds to allegations." "That's them," Robert said into the phone. "Eduardo's children." The older of the 2 men was speaking in Italian. Robert couldn't understand all of it, but he caught enough words to get the general meaning. Then the English translation appeared as subtitles on the screen. "These accusations against our late father are completely false and deeply offensive. Our family has built a reputation over generations as honest wine merchants. This attack on our name appears to be orchestrated by disgruntled former employees seeking financial gain." Robert felt his blood pressure rising. "They're calling Rosa a liar." "Keep watching," Antonio said grimly. The younger son took over speaking. "We have evidence that this woman, Rosa Ademola, was dismissed from our employment 6 months ago for theft. When we refused to give her a financial settlement, she apparently decided to fabricate these outrageous claims about my father's business practices." "That's not true," Robert shouted at the television. "Rosa wasn't fired. She was still working at the villa when I bought it." "They are lying," Antonio confirmed. "But they are doing it on national television, with very expensive lawyers standing behind them. This is going to be a problem." The sister, Isabella, leaned toward the microphones. Her voice was smooth and confident. "We are fully cooperating with the authorities and welcome any investigation. We are confident that the truth will emerge and our father's good name will be restored. In the meantime, we have filed defamation lawsuits against those spreading these lies." The press conference ended, and the news anchors began discussing it. One of them mentioned that the Castellano family had hired one of Italy's most powerful law firms. Robert switched off the TV and got dressed quickly. "Antonio, I'm coming to the police station." "Where's Rosa?" "Does she know about this?" "Detective Moretti is with her now." "Robert, you need to be prepared." The Castellano family is not just defending themselves, they are attacking. They have money, connections, and they are fighting back hard. An hour later, Robert was at the safe house with Rosa, Antonio, and Detective Moretti. Rosa sat at a table with the morning newspapers spread out in front of her. Every one of them had headlines about the Castellano scandal, and many included her photograph. "How did they get my picture?" Rosa asked quietly. "They have resources," Detective Moretti said. "They probably pulled it from old employment records or surveillance footage." "Rosa, I am not going to lie to you. This is going to get harder before it gets better. Rosa's hands were shaking as she picked up one of the newspapers. The article called her a former domestic worker with a criminal record in her home country. "I do not have a criminal record," Rosa said, her voice breaking. "I have never been arrested. Never been in trouble." "This is a lie." "Of course it is," Antonio said angrily. "They are making things up. But the damage is done. People read these headlines and they believe them." Robert pulled up a chair next to Rosa. "We knew they would fight back. We're going to prove they're lying." Detective Moretti's phone rang. She answered it, listened for a moment, and her expression darkened. She stepped out of the room to take the call. When she came back a few minutes later, she looked troubled. "That was my supervisor. The Castellano family has filed a formal complaint about this investigation. They are claiming we are harassing them and violating their rights. Their lawyers are demanding that all evidence be reviewed by an independent party before we proceed." "Can they do that?" Robert asked. "They can try, and with their connections, they might succeed in delaying the investigation." Detective Moretti sat down heavily. "There is more. 2 of the witnesses we contacted, collectors who bought wine from Eduardo, have now said they do not want to cooperate. They claim they have no complaints about their purchases. They are being pressured," Antonio said. "Or paid off. Probably both." The detective looked at Rosa. "I need to ask you something. The Castellano family claims you were fired for theft. Can you prove you were still employed when Mr. Wellington bought the property?" Rosa nodded quickly. "I have papers. My work permit, my contract. Everything is in my room at the villa." "We need to get those documents," Robert said. "I'll go back to the villa and—" "No," Detective Moretti interrupted. "Robert, you cannot go back there alone. If the Castellano family is watching the property, it could be dangerous. Then send officers with me. But we need those documents to prove Rosa is telling the truth." After some discussion, Detective Moretti agreed. 2 police officers would accompany Robert back to the villa to retrieve Rosa's employment papers. Antonio wanted to come too, but the detective said it was better if he stayed in Florence to handle any legal developments. The drive back to Tuscany felt longer than before. Robert sat in the back of an unmarked police car with 2 officers who barely spoke. His mind kept returning to the image of Rosa's face as she read those newspaper lies about herself. After 30 years of silence, she had finally spoken up, and this was her reward, being called a liar and a thief on national television. When they arrived at the villa, everything looked normal. The gates were still locked, the gardens peaceful in the morning sun. But Robert felt uneasy as they walked to the front door. He unlocked it and stepped inside. The house was quiet. "Too quiet. Where is Rosa's room?" one of the officers asked. "Upstairs in the back corner. Follow me."